We are back with On the Road of Recovery with Max from Portsmouth, Ohio. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Thanks so much for coming out and joining us. Can you start off by describing your childhood?
Yeah. When I get asked about what it was like growing up, I had a real, what I would consider very normal childhood, very Beaver Cleaver-esque, very much like I think what a lot of people consider like the middle America average experience, right? I had a mom and a dad that lived together. They weren't divorced. I grew up in a home that I had a pool in the side yard. Dad worked for the city, mom worked at the college. Santa Claus came every Christmas, like all that kind of stuff, right? So thinking back to my childhood, and I know a lot of people, like when you get into those stories of kind of why did you start using and those sorts of things, there is oftentimes a traumatic event that's associated with that, or a broken home that's associated with that. At least things that people can look at and point to as like, oh, well, you know, if that would have happened to you, you can understand how a person would go on to drug addiction. I'm a person that grew up with everything that I ever wanted at my fingertips, right? Okay. And not only material things and kind of, you know, like food, water, light, shelter, all those things provided. I also have loving and supporting parents, right? Just the two kindest, nicest, most supportive people you would ever met. Grew up in a home with lots of love. I have an older sister that just echoed what my parents had done as well. Mm-hmm. So like my childhood and my upbringing was one that is a complete demonstration that drug addiction and substance use disorders don't care about what your background was. Like, this is a brain disease. This is something that you develop the disorder because you start to use the substances, and then you build habits, and then it turns into symptoms after a while, right? No matter where you came from. And my story is the shining example of that. I'm the person on paper that had every opportunity, even the protective factors in school that you look for. I was involved in sports. I got decent grades. I was the class president, the football captain. Like I'm saying, like I'm the kid that had it going on for him, right? Mm-hmm. And then also the kid that went on to get hopelessly addicted to opiates. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That everybody thought like, oh, well, he'll never make it out of that either. So
okay. Yeah. So when did you first start experimenting?
So I kind of preface that too with saying like my family's a very normal family, right? Mm-hmm. Normal people drink alcohol. That's something that I think from a very young age I saw in my home. That was like the one thing when I really examined like my upbringing, was that despite the fact that nobody was getting in trouble and the law wasn't showing up at the house and everybody was going to work and the bills were paid, my family did drink alcohol, but it revolved around like events and things, weddings, parties at holidays and things like that. There was never any sort of like abuse or anything that I saw, but I did see adults use alcohol. Mm-hmm. And so from that, I had a very early exposure and access to alcohol just because it was in my house, gotcha. Right? Mm-hmm. Nothing that, and I don't think a lot of people consider that to be like a risk factor. Right. But just because I grew up in a house with alcohol, it gave me access to it, right? And so I would say from an early age of 12 or 13, started like to sneak and drink, mm-hmm. just because I associated that with a good time.
Right, absolutely.
And I still consider myself to be a guy that likes to have fun, you know. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, I saw adults using alcohol to have fun, and so I wanted in on that. And so that started early. The thing that we know about the disease of addiction is that it is progressive, right? And so then from there, it started with alcohol. And then it went on to other dried substances like marijuana, smoking weed with my friends, sneaking off to do things like that. And that was, I guess, another thing that very early on, that early stage addiction stuff, is a lot of secrecy, a lot of dishonesty by leaving things out to my parents about what I was doing, where I was going, and those types of things. But it quickly went from like alcohol to weed, and then of course like later on to other drugs. Like, spoiler alert, I already kind of said that I got hopelessly addicted to, you know, opiates.
Right.
So
can you talk a little bit about that part of your story?
Yeah. So like from like drinking and smoking carried on into other substances. And I think a lot of things that friend group that I had created on my own was things that we were doing to like party and have fun, mm-hmm. Cocaine, ecstasy, like these types of things, right? And it was just like, we were of college age. We were going to parties where lots of kids were doing that stuff, where it was just like part of our normal kind of culture that we had created for ourselves, right? When I look back, though, it's one of those things of like from the time that I was about 18 years old until I got clean when I was 24, I was using some substance every day. And so then that leads into other things. And then my real drug of choice turned out to be opiates. I started with Oxycontin. Again, I grew up in the town that created the model of the pill mill, which is a lucrative business model. But anyways, right, it's totally decimated like our area and our economy and our health around here. But it was something that substance was available, and I was doing all these other things. So it was like, well, that won't happen to me. I won't get addicted to those things. I'll just, play around and whatever. And but eventually, opiates were my drug of choice because I was physically dependent on them. It wasn't any sort of like option of am I going to use or not. It was just like when or how.
And were you able to access them through those pill mill doctors, or were you purchasing them off the street?
Yeah, I was purchasing them off the street, but the pipeline was the doctors, right? And I think it's 2011, there were 10 million Oxycontin tablets dispensed in the 45662 area code.
Oh my!
And those kind of numbers get you on A&E. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those kind of numbers like make you the center point. This area, the center point of the opioid epidemic, and we are the cradle. Like I said, Dr. Proctor created that business model in South Shore, Kentucky, and then the doctors in Portsmouth. I think at one point in time there were a dozen pill mills that were operating in the city limits and things like that. So, I mean, very much so. Like we were an area that, due to the poverty that was here, when we were able to get something large scale that was being targeted in our communities by Big Pharma, right? We were able to take that and we were able to do some things for ourselves at that point in time, right?
Right.
But then as well, it was everywhere. In 2009, 2010, you could buy an Oxycontin 80 from anyone in the city of Portsmouth for $50, or at least it seemed that way.
Right.
Looking back, I know that's not true, but that's the way it felt at the time. Everybody's doing it. It's not that big of a deal, and that's one of those things that led into other things like heroin, led into other things like IV use, and that's just other stuff that I said I'd never do, right? And that's, I guess, really when I look back at my story, and this is something that was taught to me once I got in recovery, but the real part of my disease that takes over is the way that is my inability to control my wanting to cut back, my wanting to quit but not being able to, my cravings for the things, using despite the consequences, all that stuff that goes along with the actual diagnosis of a substance use disorder. For a long time, I'd been playing this game where if I could just get the algorithm right, if I could just I'll drink on these days and then I'll do these pills on these days, or my favorite, I'll get this much and I'll make it last this long, or I'll buy this many and I'll only do this many and then I'll sell the rest. Like all those different kind of algorithms. It's like none of that ever worked, man. And so what I found out is that was me trying to stop, control, and manage my disease, right? And those are indicators that Nat was for you, YouTube. The me trying to stop, manage, and control my disease was the indicator that there was a problem. If it wasn't out of control, I wouldn't have had to do anything about it.
Right, absolutely.
And I thought that those kind of problems revolved around IV use, heroin, Oxycontin, opiates, those kind of things. When I really look back, it went all the way back to the drinking. Well, I'm only going to drink on the weekends, like in high school. I'm not going to smoke weed in football season. I couldn't follow those rules, but I didn't think I had a problem until, I'm dope sick, going through opiate withdrawal because I didn't have these other substances that I'd had a strong affinity for, later on. But yeah, so that's you kind of lay it out, and that's the whole progression of the disease. I'd consider myself to be a trash can junkie. I'll do all the trash that I can. You know what I mean? Opiates are my drug of choice, but really I'll do whatever else too, and so I'm also one of those people. I know a lot of times I'll hear folks in the field I work in, well, I never had a problem with alcohol. That's one we hear a lot.
Right.
And so then I was kind of like that when I came in. Well, my problem is that I get physically sick when I don't have these opiates. And then I had a counselor at the time we were kind of going through some of those things, and he was like, well, what about alcohol? And it's like, well, what about it? I never really, I don't get sick when I don't have alcohol. And he asked about legal charges, just kind of like conversation point, right? And we started thinking about it, and I was like, all my legal charges revolve around alcohol. So it's just one of those things, like any sort of substance, I've never had any success at trying to keep it on the rails while I'm using it, man. So, and that's why like abstinence is a thing that works for me today.
Absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about some of those consequences that you experienced for yourself?
Yeah. So let's see. Gosh.
The highlights.
And again, it starts with all the other stuff, just like it started with my grades falling when I was in high school. It started with getting in-school suspension when I was in school. It progressed on to losing jobs. It progressed on to signing over custody. It progressed on to having to go to an institution to stop using drugs. Getting kicked out of college. One of the things I always talk about is I got the opportunity to play college football at Morehead State, and that was a dream that I'd had as a kid, was to play like a sport that I loved in college, and like giving that dream up because I had other things that were more important. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So think about when the month before you went into recovery. Could you paint that picture of what your life was like? Not so much on the outside, but a little bit on the outside, but also those feelings inside that you were dealing with.
Yeah. My dad was terminally ill with cancer at that point in time. Yeah. And that was when I really think about it, like my dad passed away when I had like 2 weeks clean.
Okay.
I'd gone to a detox. I'd gone to a treatment center after the detox. And I was at the detox for a week and then was in the treatment center for a week, and he passed away. And so like when I think about the timing of that, and I got to go home and do the family thing and be present at those kind of events, the wake and the funeral and those kind of things. But like when I look back at the time before that, it's like I had a real opportunity to like step up and be a member of my family and help my mom and like, spend time with my dad and those kind of things. But I was just like, I was hiding out. I would turn my phone on for long enough to like cop, and then I'd turn my phone back off again. I'd kind of burn all my bridges as far as favors. I was just like emotionally bankrupt, didn't know what to do. I couldn't imagine continuing on like that, but I couldn't imagine stopping using either. So I was kind of just at a loss as to what to do. Had started using IV at that point, right? It was just hopeless. One of the last like dirtball things I did when I was using was I'd sold my car that my parents had bought me. I'd sold the car for money because you can't shoot up a car,
right?
So you got to liquidate it, and then it used the money to buy drugs, and then it ran through that in like 3 days. And so then I'm at a hotel in town, and I like wake up that morning, and it's like, oh fuck, like I got to get out of here. But then I was like, well, how do I get out of here? I don't have my car anymore. You know what I mean? So it's just like, just a total inability to take care of myself. And it's like people hear stories like that. And it's like, man, I can't believe it. That why can't they just stop thing. It's like, I consider myself today to be like a sound mind and like a pretty rational person. But at that point in time, selling my car made sense.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that speaks to me, it speaks to like the brain disease portion of this thing. It's like my inability to think and reason with myself is just totally absent.
Right.
And that's where I was operating, and my brain was telling me that to use one more time was survival, that it was as important as my next breath. It was important as water. It was important as food. It was important as breathing.
Yeah.
That like I had to use. And so that's kind of the primal sort of like state that I was in that last month, I think.
Well, and when you bring up about the brain disease, it is, studies and research shows that addiction is very much in the midbrain, and it's not the prefrontal cortex. Yes, that's where we make all the bad decisions, but that the survival part of it, that's where the addiction really does affect. So
yeah, and I say that, you know, that the frontal cortex stuff isn't necessarily where we make all the bad decisions. It's just where the breakdown happens, that we're unable to reason with ourselves, right? We're in that limbic system, that primal brain, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like trying to drown myself in a bathtub. If I get on my knees in the bathroom and I fill the bathtub up with water and I shove my head down in the bathtub, I'm going to drown myself like this. Eventually, my brain's going to override me. I'm going to pull up. I'm not going to hold my breath till I pass out. I'm not going to be in a room where there's food and starve myself to death.
Right.
Eventually, my brain's going to take over and it's going to make me do those things, right? Like we're wired for that, for survival.
Right.
And that's where addiction lives. The problem is the part of my brain that's made me, that's there to make me say like, well, let's solve this problem reasonably. Let's not hurt ourselves. Let's not, you know, let's stop and think about this. That part don't work, man. It's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you wanted to get help, what did you do?
I was fortunate. I had a friend that my family had been talking to who had a treatment experience. He said, hey, let's start with this. Let's go to detox. Let's get you taken care of, and then that'll give us some time to kind of plan what you want to do with your family, and you know, give me and you and your parents some time to like make a plan or whatever. And so then from that detox, I got out of the detox. I went to a treatment center. I got out of the residential facility. I went to the transitional living facility. I did treatment for about the first 9 or 10 months. I was clean. I was involved in some level of treatment and aftercare.
Can you talk a little bit about what you learned and what was helpful during that period of time?
Yeah, a lot of it was just like people pointing out the evidence of my own disease. Like they educated me about like the disease concept and like some of the symptoms of my disease and what early, middle, late stage addiction looks like. But the main thing that I got was people helped me make connections between the information that they were giving me and my own story. The evidence is right in front of me, right? And at that point, it becomes hard to deny that I have a problem. And for whatever reason, like I bought into that. And then from there, and I'm super grateful, and I don't know why, because a lot of times I'm a resist and buck the system, but they would tell me to do things and I would just say, okay, I'll do it. You need to go get an aftercare plan together. You need to, when you leave detox, you need to go to treatment. And it's like, okay, well, we'll figure that out. When you leave residential treatment, you need to go to a transitional living facility. You need to continue to do aftercare and counseling and those kind of things. It's like, okay, you need to get involved in the self-help fellowships. You need to, you need to go be of service in your community and those kind of things. And I just, for whatever reason, just took them at face value and just did them. You know what I mean? The main thing that's the number one underestimated like ingredient in every recovery program is that I'm just not gonna quit. Like the value of just showing up is just like totally understated in what we do, right? And that was the thing is like, you know, people just told me like don't pick up and keep coming back and those kinds of things. And like for real, the all the other stuff has just kind of fallen into place, right? Like I got out of my own way. I literally just what came to acceptance of the fact that I'm just here for a long time and it's all going to work out. So
you have this wonderful, very loving family, and unfortunately you said that your dad passed away, which I'm sorry to hear that at a young age. How did you deal with things like grief and that trauma that you may have encountered?
I was real grateful when my dad passed that it happened in the time frame that it did.
Okay.
In hindsight, at the point in time, I didn't really know what was going on, and unbeknownst to me, I was just kind of like in that constant state of kind of like prayer and meditation, like kind of like, man, I don't know what to do, but I just don't want to get high, and I'm just gonna stay here and, you know what I mean, do what the people tell me to do or whatever. But looking back, like if that would have happened a month before, you know, he died in mid-November. If he would died in mid-September, I might not even have made the funeral. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's like, so it's like, I know like, you know, it's like things could have definitely played out worse for me. And the other part too, man, is I'm super grateful that my dad got, when he passed, I was doing the right thing. And part of my repayment for those kind of debts of the past is that I continue to do the right thing. You know what I mean? And I know that he would be proud of me for that. On the grief side, people tell you things about grief, that there's like stages, and like, you know, like in the field that I'm in, like grief counseling is a thing, and people think I'm gonna like come and make them feel better or whatever. Like for me, it's just like I took kind of all the expectations off about that. You know, like my father was somebody who was very important to me in my life, one of the most influential people I've ever met, one of the most positive people I've ever met. I told the story about selling the car, right?
Right.
He bought the car. I come home the night before I go to detox, and they're asking these questions about what have you been doing, where's the car, these kind of things. My dad's as cool as the other side of the pillow. It's like, yeah, I sold the car. Well, like for what? Like for money, for drugs, you know. And he said, well, I guess they buy and sell cars every day, don't they?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And that was it, man.
Yeah.
Like that was it, dude. Yeah. Like he was just as cool as cool a dude as there was, man. Cool hand Luke, for real, you know.
Yeah. So what are some of the gifts that you've gotten to experience in recovery?
Oh, dude, like sometimes I like look around at my life and the quality of my life and the quality of the people in my life, and like it's almost like a movie, man. Like I can't even begin to like describe, like I'm watching someone else's life unfold, right? So when I got clean, I was with a girl that I used with, that was my girlfriend, and then like since I've gotten clean, like she's clean, and then we got engaged, and then we've gotten married, right?
Wow.
And she's also got like multiple years of clean time with me as well, you know. So that's probably like my number one thing that's happened, right? I at one point in time, you know, had mentioned like kind of failing as a parent, and then was fortunate that like I had family that was able to step up and fill some of those gaps. But you know, I being able to come back and be in my oldest son's life, you know, since he was a baby, really, you know, and then I've had two more sons since that have never seen, you know, kind of that side of me. They only know dad one way, right. You know. I had mentioned my grades slipping when I was in high school. That trend continued into college. And so like at one point in time, I was at Shawnee State University, go Bears, and NAIA National Men's Basketball Champions last year, by the way. Shout out to Shawnee Bears. But I was going to that I was signed up to go to school at that university and would sign up for classes every semester. But it turns out to pass, you got to go.
Right.
And so then eventually, like, I got kicked out for not meeting standards of academic progress. Turns out that's a thing that you got, if you're, you know, they expect you to actually,
come to class.
Yeah. So then after I got clean, I wrote the I'm sorry letter. You know, and they'll let you do that one time, and they let me back in, and so I graduated in 2014 with a bachelor's degree in social sciences from Shawnee State University. And then thanks. And then after that, I have gone on to get my master's in social work from Ohio University. It's we have a lot of fear, I think, just as people in recovery. Like, we know we were doing wrong, and we don't necessarily. I think part of the American culture is we don't want people to ever know that we've struggled or are doing wrong. Like, you know, like I think culturally we want things to look a certain way when we're doing them. So, but yeah, man, that's like if you're a person that's in long-term recovery, or you're a person that's, you know, like seeking treatment, like you don't have to keep that stuff a secret. Like if you need help, ask for help. If you're doing well, let people know, you know. And it's just about, like I said, honesty, and then having your heart in the right place, that you're actually committed to the thing. Right.
So if somebody's out there struggling, could you share some words of wisdom that were really helpful to you in those early days?
Yeah. I guess the wisdom is just to like seek the help that's available to you. You know what I mean? And that's kind of when I think about my boy James talking me into going to detox. Like that was the thing that was available at that time, and that's what I would tell everybody else. Like, we are fortunate at this point in time that there are lots of treatment opportunities available, and quality treatment. Not all treatment's created equal, but there are quality treatment opportunities throughout the state, and you can find those, you know. Like the agency I work for, the counseling center, has been around for over 40 years here locally. So like they're reputable agency, CARF accredited, and there's other, the Recovery Council up the road. There's lots of those places, even in the small communities, that are like reputable and have like entire systems of care that can help people. So my words of wisdom are like get involved in those things. Like, take yourself there, put yourself in the middle of that boat, and just do whatever they tell you to after that.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And I appreciate the fact that you talked about, taking that first step and then taking the next step, because this is a chronic disease and it
Sure.
needs a chronic solution.
Yeah.
So being able to go through that whole system, it's not going to get detox and done and, things are magically better. So
it's one of those weird things, like substance use disorders are diagnosed out of the same book that all the other mental health disorders are. If I'm a person that has anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, it's not out of the question that I would see a provider, a doctor, a therapist, a psychiatrist, whatever, for years, maybe my entire life. But for whatever reason, and I believe it's because of stigma, substance use disorders, we are expected to, you're going to go to detox, you're going to go to treatment for 30 days, and you're going to get your shit together after that.
Yep.
Meanwhile, it's a brain disease just like all the other diseases, right? And that's one of the things that I hope to do, like within my professional career, is like normalize long-term treatment for people who are recovering from substance use disorders.
Yes.
Because that's what's going to work, right? That's what's going to work, is like the sort of commitment to long-term care, just like treating any other chronic disease is, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming out and joining us. Is there anything that we missed that you wanted to share, or any other shout outs out there?
Gosh, man, I don't know. Like I said, I could probably go on forever about like the beautiful things that are happening or the people that have supported me, but I don't think I got anything extra to add. 2C for life, and I hope that somebody gets something out of this, man. That's why I share the story and do things like this. I hope somebody hears it and thinks that could help.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming out. It was a beautiful story and really just covered everything from start to finish. Was really wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
I really appreciate you guys for tuning in. This was